Okay, this is take 3 of this episode. My memory card has failed uh every time I've tried to record this. That being said, I'm sure you're all wondering, hey, is she going to talk about the election? Not really, because I'm filming this before we got the election results. But even if we had the election results, I wouldn't really be talking about it. I mean, I care a little bit, like I voted, but ultimately, here's what we believe as Christians. God is sovereign, God is good, and God's plans cannot be stopped. So, whether the person you wanted got in office or the person you didn't want got in office, it's the person God wanted in office. We know biblically that God has used world leaders, political leaders, whatever, to make his purposes come to be. And sometimes that actually is to punish nations and to punish large groups of people. The Israelites were taken over by the Babylonians. That was a whole political thing. But it was for the purpose of God saying, hey, did you forget that you're my people and you can't be serving other gods and worshiping idols and not being faithful to me? So I'm just saying, whatever the outcome of this is, yeah, maybe long term it'll be great. Maybe long term it'll be bad. Maybe long term it won't really matter all that much at all. Either way, we can trust that God is in control and he knows what he's doing. We have a very narrow minded view of things, of the world, of our own lives, of our own situations. God has the big picture, he has the full picture of the whole world, of all of history, of everything. He knows what needs to happen. So if you've been really stressy, like, I get it, okay? Because this is your life and you've only lived this life and this is all you know. And what if it all changes? What if it's all bad? Blah, blah, blah. I get that. But also, this earth is not our home. This life is only temporary. Eternity is eternity. And ultimately, God knows what he's doing. So rest in that, rest in him. Uh, okay, that's all I want to say about politics. Today we're talking about Deuteronomy. We're actually going to be talking about Deuteronomy pretty much the rest of season 1. So season 1 will end at the end of this year, 2024. I did mention that we're going to do a follow-up episode on my conversation with Erica in regards to spiritual warfare and like what does that look like biblically as opposed to like the traditions of how we deal with spiritual warfare, because there is a difference in those things and I want to talk about it and I want to be very clear about like, here's what tradition says, here's what the Bible says, like, which things do we hold loosely, which things do we take as, like, the Word of God. Obviously, the Bible is the one we take very seriously. But anyway, we're not going to do that episode until the end of season 1, just because I think it will work better that way with the flow of the season. So, if you are like, oh no, I really need spiritual warfare info right now, I will have some links in the show notes of different resources for you. One of them will probably be a podcast I was a guest on, because I think we talked about some of those things, but maybe it won't be because I don't really remember the full extent of that conversation. It was like 2 years ago. Anyway, I'll have resources down there for you to look at if you cannot wait till January. Woof. That being said, I think I was saying that we're going to be in Deuteronomy pretty much the rest of the time. Guys, Deuteronomy is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I never thought I would be saying that. I always kind of thought of Deuteronomy as this, like, oh, it's necessary to know the context of why Jesus did the things he did and, like, why the world was the way that it was when Jesus was on earth. And so, like, we can know the full extent of the goodness of the gospel, but, like, Deuteronomy itself is kind of like, a boring read. It turns out it's not. It turns out it's actually so gorgeous, so beautiful, such eye-opening passages about the character of God and who God is, and you absolutely should read it. So today we're talking about a passage called Deuteronomy chapter 4. And this chapter is all about Moses telling the Israelites, hey, when you go into the promised land, you need to remember who God is. Like, that is the most important thing of all of the things for you to know, is to know who God is. We are his chosen people as Israelites, as Israel, we are the children of the promise of the people of God. And so we need to live in the land that God has given us like we're his people. It all makes sense. It's all logical. Something very interesting to note that I wasn't ever really taught in like Sunday school, but is just wild. So all the Israelites, they have the exodus out of Egypt. They're freed from slavery under Pharaoh. They cross the Red Sea. They wander the desert for 40 years, and then they enter the promised land. Well, all of the adults that left Egypt, that crossed the Red Sea, die before they reach the promised land. Except for two guys, Joshua and Caleb. These two were the only guys that didn't turn their back on God and like curse him and bring shame to being God's chosen people. So they're the only ones that lived through the desert wanderings. Isn't that crazy? Like the children of the adults obviously were still around to go inhabit the promised land. They grew up in those 40 years. But yeah, all of the adults who left were so like stuck in that mindset of like, oh, in Egypt at least we had all these things and God just he rescued us so he could kill us out in the desert. And you know what? He did. He did, because they turned their back on God and they didn't see that he was providing hope and a future for them. So that's an interesting food for thought for you as you go about this current day and age. I'm just saying it is interesting to think about that God killed a lot of people in that desert because they didn't want to be his kids anymore, and he was like, okay, if that's the way you want it to be, that's the way it's gonna be. Anyway, yeah, so Moses is giving this whole speech in Deuteronomy 4. Now, O Israel, this is verse 1. Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I am teaching you to perform, so that you may live and go in and take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word which I am commanding you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Okay, so verse 3, then. Moses says, your eyes have seen what the Lord has done in the case of Baal Peor. For all the people who followed Baal Peor, the Lord your God has destroyed them from among you. So this is in reference to the story in Numbers 25, verses 1 through 9. This is an example of what I was just talking about, of how the people were like, oh, God is like, we don't really care about him, so we're gonna worship all these other idols and profane the name of the Lord and turn our backs on the real God. And so God killed them because they weren't living the way he told them to live, and they were going to destroy his covenant people. So he killed them. This is what he's talking about here. He's like, you saw how God killed everyone who turned away from him. So verse 4, you who have held fast to the Lord your God are alive today, every one of you. See, I've taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, and you should do thus in the land where you are entering to possess it. So keep and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it, as is the Lord our God, whenever we call on him? Or what great nation is there that has statutes and judgments as righteous as this whole law which I am setting before you today? Only give heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, so that you do not forget the things which your eyes have seen, but they do not depart from your heart all the days of your life, but make them known to your sons and your grandsons. Okay, so in Exodus, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai and the Lord talks to him, and the Lord is like in this thick cloud, and the people can hear the voice of the Lord. So now Moses is going to reference that in Deuteronomy 4, verse 10. He says, remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, where the Lord said to me, assemble the people to me, that I may let them hear my words, so they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and that they may teach your children. You, all the Israelites, came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire to the very heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and thick gloom. Then the Lord spoke to you from the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but you saw no form, only a voice. And so then he gave the 10 commandments, and there was the tablets of stone. And the Lord commanded me to teach you the statutes and judgments that you might perform them in the land where you are going to possess it, aka the promised land. Then Moses says something so interesting. So watch yourselves carefully, since you did not see any form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, so that you do not act corruptly and make a graven image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water below the earth. And beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own possession as today. Bars. Moses is spitting bars in that passage because he's saying, hey, remember the mountain when you heard the voice of the Lord? You heard it. You didn't see it. So remember when I came down that mountain to tell you the 10 commandments that the Lord had given me, and you all had a golden calf made to worship like idolaters? We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that because when God revealed himself to you, he spoke in a voice, not in a visible physical image. So when you go into the promised land, don't start to think, oh my gosh, we need a God who's real. We need a God we can touch and feel. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because the living God, who you never saw, delivered you out of Egypt and gave you the promised land. So don't start making this amazing God that you can't even fathom into something smaller than he is so that you can wrap your mind around him. He's powerful and infinite and amazing, and let him stay that way. Don't make him into something that you can touch and feel so you can be like, this is my God. He's my little pet. That's not who God is. He is a voice from the mountain that spews fire and thunder and darkness and cloud, and you need to tremble at his feet, not hold his little statue on the couch. Verse 23, so watch yourselves, that you do not forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make for yourselves a graven image in the form of anything against which the Lord your God has commanded you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. We know this is true. He started this off by saying, hey, remember Baal Peor? All those guys that died because they started serving idols? That wasn't a one-time thing. That's the number one commandment. You shall have no other gods, because God is God. When you become the father of children and children's children and have remained long in the land and act corruptly. This is a when, not an if. When you've been in the promised land and you have grandkids because you've been there a while, and you start acting corruptly. When you make an idol in the form of anything and do that which is evil in the sight of the Lord your God so as to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that you will surely perish quickly from the land where you are going over the Jordan to possess it. You shall not live long in it, but will be utterly destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord drives you. There you will serve gods, the work of man's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you search for him with all your heart and with all your soul. Guys, this is what I'm saying about the election, about the powers that be, about the bad things being for the purpose of God, okay? When you get comfortable and your life is good, you're in the promised land. You start to think, what do I need God for? Like, I'm doing fine on my own. I'm doing great. What do we need God for? And you start forgetting about him, and you do your own thing, and you're God now. Maybe you're not serving a little idol of stone or wood. You're not putting it on a shelf and bowing down and saying prayers to this little idol that can't eat or hear or sleep or whatever. Maybe you're your own God. I do think that's how it is in the West. Our number one idol is ourselves. But you need to understand that you are so, so, so limited in your knowledge of the world and what you need. You ever think about, like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't get what I wanted 10 years ago. I'm so glad I didn't get what I wanted, because that would have ruined my life if I got what I wanted. Yeah, God knows that. That's why when you prayed for that thing and God didn't give it to you, and you were like, God, why would you do this to me? He knew. He knows. God is a good God. He's a gracious God. He's a giving God. He's not going to withhold good things from you. So if he's withholding it, you can trust with full faith and confidence it's not a good thing for you. Even if you can't understand how that could possibly be, how that could possibly make sense, I'm telling you, there's blessing in the not having. So, I went off on a tangent there. I don't even know what I was trying to say. What was I saying? Okay. Thank you. So we forget that. We start to think we can do everything. We're the best. We're the only person who can make it happen. And so we are striving and we're striving and striving. And eventually something's going to happen that's going to make you hit rock bottom again. And you will have nowhere to turn to except someone more powerful than you. Oh, God. This is what Moses is saying is going to happen. You guys are going to get comfy in your good life in the promised land, and you're going to forget about God, and he's going to destroy you. He's talking about the Babylonians coming. This didn't happen till much later in the Old Testament. But yeah, the Israelites, they stopped serving God, and all these, they get taken away. They get captured and ruled over, and it's the exile. This is where we get the book of Daniel. It comes out of this whole thing. But it's there that the people get to reacquaint themselves with God. So ultimately, this is a good thing for them, because they've forgotten God, they're living wickedly. They need this moment to remember who they are. They are God's people. When you are in distress and all these things have come upon you, in the latter days you will return to the Lord your God and listen to his voice. For the Lord your God, get this, is a compassionate God. He will not fail you nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers which he swore to them. Indeed, ask now concerning the former days which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and inquire from one end of the heavens to the other. Has anything been done like this great thing, or has anything been heard like it? Has any people heard the voice of God speaking from the midst of the fire, as you have heard it, and survived? Because here's the thing about God, guys. He is so, we've talked about this before, he's so holy and perfect and righteous and good that our twisted, sinful, fallen, finite human existence cannot be in his presence without just combusting. And so this is why you cannot look at God. In the Old Testament, this happens like you can't look at God. This is how holy God is. And so Moses is like, "Hey, remember how powerful God is? Like, you have had the greatest privilege to hear audibly his voice on the mountain, speaking from the fire on the mountain, and you're still alive. You're still alive to tell people that you saw that. So you have a great privilege, and you need to live like that. Like that is true, that you are a chosen, gifted, blessed people to experience firsthand a powerful, holy God that intimately. And I know for some of us, this day and age, that's hard for us to imagine. Like, oh, you think a God speaking from the top of a mountain that you're not even allowed to touch, by the way, or you'll die. You think that's intimacy with God? Yeah. it was. That's what a close relationship with God looked like. So how much more blessed are we in this modern 21st century that we have the Spirit living inside of us, that we can talk to God casually without being smited for not being, I don't know, polite enough. Our culture, here's the thing, Western America, we love a relational God, and sometimes we forget that God is holy and he is other, and he is not just some dude in the sky. He's actually a higher being than we are. And so I think sometimes our casualty, that's not it. Our casualness with the Lord prevents us from appreciating what it means that God draws near to us, like literally lives in community, in unity with us, that his spirit would reside in us. Yeah, don't take the Spirit's presence for granted, because the heroes of the faith that we read about in the Old Testament, they didn't have that. They had the voice of God on a mountain speaking to them, and that was a divine privilege. So how much more should our faith be if we have God right next to us every day? Where was I? Has a god tried to take for himself a nation from within another nation by trials, by signs and wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm, and by great terrors, as the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? To you it was shown that you might know the Lord, he is God. There is no other beside him. I'm literally emotional about this because all of these things, these terrible, like, they're the 10 plagues, the 12 plagues. I should know this. Literally sang a song about it. I was in a musical about Moses, and we sang a song about the plagues. 12 plagues, 10 plagues, whatever. The plagues of Egypt. They were plagues. They weren't blessings, but they were, because it was by these terrible, horrific things happening to the land of Egypt that God's people got to know him better, that they got to see him rescue them out of the heavens. Oh, jeez, I'm gonna cry my eyes out. Out of the heavens, he let you hear his voice to discipline you. And on earth, he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words from the midst of the fire, because he loved your fathers. Therefore, he chose their descendants after them. And he personally brought you from Egypt by his great power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in and to give you their land for an inheritance, as it is today. Know therefore today, and take it to your heart, that the Lord, he is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. So you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I am giving you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may live long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Oh, let me get it together. I love this passage because it's an example of what we need to do when our life starts to get hard. Moses is telling all these people, hey, you're going to go into the promised land. And when you get there, life is going to be comfy. We're going to talk about this when we talk about Deuteronomy 6. Deuteronomy 6 absolutely wrecked me. I cried the hardest I've cried in years. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It knocked me to the ground. But Moses is saying, hey, when you get to the promised land and life is easy and you're tempted to say you don't need God anymore, you need to remind yourself, you need to preach to yourself, you need to teach your children so they cannot forget and stray away, because this is the kind of God you have. He is powerful, he is real, he is present, and he cares for you. God, he loved your forefathers, and therefore he has chosen and decided to love you too, because you are their descendants. His blessings pass from generation to generation to generation to the 1,000th generation. God is faithful. So when you start to think, oh no, I don't need God anymore, and life gets hard because you have forgotten God and you said you don't need Him anymore, and now you don't know where to turn back to God because He's not forgotten you. Even though you forgot Him, even though you turned your back on Him, He has not done that. Because He made a promise to your forefathers, and that promise extends to you. He is a compassionate God. He will not fail you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant. And maybe you're sitting here and you're like, okay, that's great for the Israelites, but I'm not Jewish. I'm not either. I'm a Gentile. The cool thing about the covenant is God renewed the covenant through Jesus, and Jesus extended that that Abrahamic covenant to the rest of the world. Even before Jesus, if you were a Gentile, you could become a Jew and be a people of God. But now you can just be a people of God. You don't have to become a Jew. Anyway, that's a different conversation. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is the principle it applies to you because Jesus's life and death and resurrection, through that he said this is for all people. This is for all people. Salvation is for all people. If you believe in me, you are adopted into this spiritual family. So when you get in the hardship and you don't know what to do, you need to remember, like Moses is commanding the Israelites here, who is the God I have seen? Who is the God I have heard? Who is the God I have come to know? Because he is the God who is going to get you through. He is the God you can rely on, you can depend on. He is the God who is real. I wish I would have done this in Kentucky, but I got so skewed, so turned around with my understanding of blessing, and if I'm doing ministry for God, then God's going to do things for me. And that's not how it works. That's not how it works. God has given me salvation. Why is that not enough? Why do you think you need to be rich and have a nice house and have a good family and have this and that and the other to be happy? It's not Jesus and it's Jesus, period. So when life is good, remember who God is. When life is bad, remember who God is, because it's only remembering who God is that is going to let you continue to live. That's Deuteronomy 4, man. You are only alive today because you've held fast to the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 4:4. I don't know how to end this. I never know how to end podcasts, but like today I really don't, because I feel like I just dropped a lot of reality. And I'm just gonna have to let you sit with it and think about it and ponder it. If it's some new thoughts for you, because this is the world we live in. You only exist by the grace of God. So what are you gonna do with that? Are you gonna live in thanksgiving and appreciate the good blessings He gives you? Are you going to live with thanksgiving even when life is hard, because He has given you the gift of knowing Him, the only source of true joy and peace and love? Or are you going to forget who God is and turn your back on Him and die? Well, I think I just brought it down even further. Sorry to kill the mood. But if you're anything like me, you're gonna listen to this and be so on fire for Jeez Louise. Anyway, uh yeah, so on that happy note, go live for God, guys. He's so cool. Open up your Bible, crack open that Bible that's been sitting on your shelf for years, and read it. Read it, because I'm telling you, the way God reveals himself, like speaking on a mountain in fire, he will reveal himself to you through this book if you seek him with your whole heart. Deuteronomy 4. He is a real, active, living God. He speaks to us today, and He wants to meet you. He wants to do things, show you signs and wonders and terrors, and rescue you so that you may know Him, because He is life. He is life. He is the only reason that life is worth living. I truly, truly, if I did not have God in my life, I would not be alive anymore. I would have died long ago, and anyone who knows my story knows that's true. Get to know God. He's the only one who's going to get you through. He's the only one. And guess what? When this life is over, when these temporary sufferings are done, we get to live with him forever. And man, guys, I could chat about heaven for days. It's going to be so grand. You can't even begin to imagine, can't even begin to dream how great it's going to be there. Ugh, man. But in the meantime, we're given this life, so live it to the fullest. That's the pod for today. I'm going to go. I will see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to share some cool, oh my gosh, I had this great night earlier this summer. I'm going to tell you the whole story. It was amazing, and God has just like kind of expounded on that and in really cool key moments since then. So I'm going to share that story because I'm telling you guys, the God in the Bible is the God of today. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and forevermore. He is still doing the things he's doing. So Deuteronomy 4, hey, remember when God spoke to you in the mountain? Next time I'm going to tell you, hey, this is a time where God spoke to me personally, and it's a time I look back on and remember, and I say, hey, that's who God is. Don't forget, because I want you to be able to learn, how do I look back? How do I experience God so I have moments to look back on and remember this is who God is. If you don't have those moments yet, reading the Bible is a great place to start. It's a great place to start. Anyway, okay, I gotta go. This episode is gonna be so long.